listener production.
Hey, Chris Beer with you. Welcome to The Briefing. There's a disease almost every Aussie will get before the age of 2, and now a new free vaccine is available, offering protection from birth.
This is actually the first time that we've been able to protect babies before they're actually born. We know that it dramatically reduces the chance of a baby needing hospital care, especially during those first vulnerable months.
That deep dive in partnership with the Australian government looking into the new and free maternal RSV vaccine is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Tuesday, the 17th of June.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're starting this morning in India, where more than 70 bodies have been returned to the families who lost loved ones in the fatal Air India flight in the country's northwest last week. The flight carrying 242 people was headed for London from Ahmedabad, but crashed into a medical college hostel shortly after takeoff, after the pilot made a mayday call seconds after the plane left the runway.
241 people on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner died, including Indian, British, Canadian and Portuguese nationals, with just one person surviving, while dozens in the hostel were also killed. Crash investigators say they've now recovered 2 black boxes from the crash site, which were carrying the plane's flight data and the pilot's voice recordings. They will now be analysed to determine the cause of the crash. Authorities say the DNA of almost 120 victims have since been matched, with bodies now being returned to grieving family members.
Yeah, and while some have been able to already hold funerals for their loved ones, some UK families have actually called out the response, saying it's been inadequate, disorganised and lacking appropriate support and information for them. India is leading the crash investigation with support from teams in the US and UK, and it's expected to take months, with the crash one of the deadliest aviation disasters globally in decades.
Staying overseas, and the US has joined Australia in issuing a do not travel alert to Israel as heavy strikes between the country and Iran enter a 4th day, with Israel's Iron Dome defense system failing to intercept some missiles that have pounded the country's centre and north. Israeli authorities say missiles were fired overnight by Iran, with the death toll in the country now rising to 24.
And it comes as Israel claims it has full control of the airspace over Iran's capital, Tehran, and is continuing strikes this morning on oil sites, military targets in residential areas, and the country's state TV broadcaster. At least 224 people have been confirmed dead since Israel first struck on Friday, according to Iran's health ministry.
Now, this has all been unfolding as world leaders are in Canada for the G7 summit that's still underway. According to reports, the group of 7 leaders have drafted a joint statement calling for de-escalation, but it's unclear whether Donald Trump will sign that. Speaking at the summit, though, the US president did confirm that Iran is seeking and willing to negotiate a ceasefire.
It's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
And we know that Trump's expected to meet with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in the next 24 hours or so, but the latest conflict is not expected to be at the top of that agenda.
The discussion with President Trump, I expect, will be very much about Australia and the United States, and we've got a few things to talk about.
The PM's previously said that that'll likely be AUKUS and exemptions to Trump's tariffs.
Tributes are flowing for a police officer who was shot dead while carrying out a search warrant on a rural Tasmanian property. The sergeant, who Tasmania police aren't naming out of respect for the family, is being remembered as genuine and dependable, having served for over 20 years.
The 57-year-old was shot dead in the state's northwest at North Moreton on Monday while serving a court order relating to repossession of the home. A second officer was also shot while walking toward the house but had managed to call for help, while the owner surrendered after being shot in the hand. Tasmania Police Commissioner Donna Adams has labelled the shooting an absolute tragedy.
The safety of our officers is our number one priority, and to see an officer tragically killed in these circumstances is truly shocking.
The alleged shooter remains under police guard in hospital, with charges expected to be laid once he's finished receiving treatment.
Betting giant Tabcorp has copped a $4 million fine for breaching spam laws. The Australian Communications and Media Authority finding the gambling giant sent over 2,500 messages via text or WhatsApp to VIP customers between February and May last year without offering a way to unsubscribe. Now, why that's important is because under spam laws, businesses must have customer consent before sending marketing messages, and where they do send those messages, they've got to include a working unsubscribe option.
Yeah, and look, this is the first time that the communication watchdog has found spam breaches in VIP betting programs, which often offer bonus bets, rebates or tickets to sporting events. And Tabcorp's already paid the fine and says it's fixing its systems to include opt-out options and will independently review its marketing material. Now, in the past 18 months, the watchdog has actually fined various companies more than $16.9 million for breaches of spam laws. But these mega giant betting companies, they make so much money. I do wonder whether that makes any dent or impact for them.
Yeah, which is an interesting point that ACMA kind of made as well when it comes to these VIP programs. You know, we're not talking about high rollers here. We're talking about everyday Australians, sometimes Australians who are doing it incredibly tough and are experiencing gambling harm. We do have a bunch of data and research to suggest that marketing like this, these spam text messages, actually contribute to gambling harm. So that's when you spend beyond your means. If you are interested in this topic in any shape, way or form, I did a deep dive into it earlier in the year. I spoke to 3 blokes who casually bet in Australia to talk about all these different tactics and what exactly it is that keeps them coming back to the betting table.
And it looks as though us Aussies are spending up big on our vices. We are forking out around $261 a week, according to Finder, on indulgences like booze, takeaway, cigarettes and vapes. And that adds up to more than $13,500 a year, clearly where my money is going. It says the biggest one, though, is takeaway, which I can admit to is one of my vices. I am spending too much money on Uber Eats. My partner and I have actually had to delete the app a few times.
Oh, gosh. And yes, because my parents listen to this podcast daily, mine also is Uber Eats and not booze or cigarettes at all. No vapes in the slightest, Mum and Dad. No, I'm with you. Uber Eats is like the hardest thing to shake as well. I haven't taken it to the extreme of deleting the app, but honestly, it's so easy. And again, like the Tabcorp thing, once they send you a little push notification or a text message where they go, oh, hey, there's 10% off if you pay now and you get something from your favourite burger joint. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm in, I'm sold.
Rude not to.
Yeah, like yesterday, I'm glad I am not alone in this. Hey, that brings our headlines to a close. Up next is Sacha Barbagat's deep dive in partnership with the Australian government about a disease that affects almost every Aussie before the age of 2 and the free vaccine offering protection. Stick around, that's coming up for you next.
Hi, Sacha Barbagat with you. Welcome to this episode of The Briefing in partnership with the Australian government. For new parents like me, the health of your baby is paramount. And for a long time, a very common respiratory virus has posed an invisible but serious threat. Almost all Australian infants will get RSV, or respiratory syncytial virus, before their second birthday. Some will suffer serious complications, and in the very worst cases, babies can die from RSV. But now there's a new free vaccine that's been added to our national immunisation program that offers groundbreaking protection from RSV to pregnant women and their babies. It means expectant mums can have the jab during pregnancy to safeguard their baby from the moment they are born. To find out more about the free maternal RSV vaccine today, I'm joined by Dr. Linny Fong. She's a paediatric infectious disease physician. Linny, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing today. Look, it feels like we've only very recently started talking about RSV, and I think that was especially after COVID. I've had a few people say to me, well, what actually is this virus? Can you explain it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So RSV firstly stands for respiratory syncytial virus. It is not a new virus, but a lot of people think so because you're right, like people started talking about it around about the time of COVID. Firstly, it's a really common virus. It affects the airways, so the lungs and the small sort of airways. And what we know is that most children have caught this virus by the age of 2, so it's quite common. We know that it spreads through coughs and sneezes and through touching contaminated surfaces as well. For most people, it causes a runny nose and a cough. But in babies and particularly newborns, it can be a bit more risky. And so what we see in these younger children is they can get bronchiolitis or pneumonia, which is essentially, inflammation or infection of the airways, which causes them to have difficulty breathing and wheezing and, affects their feeding.
Social media can be a scary place. And I know for me, I was seeing videos of families whose small babies were in hospital with RSV. And it's absolutely terrifying to think about your own child being in that position. Is that what you're seeing in the hospitals? And explain to us, convey to us just how scary and dangerous it is.
When we do our ward rounds, we can hear the RSV, in the wards. We often will have multiple babies with RSV and or other viruses at the same time. And you can hear that sort of moist cough. You can hear that unfortunate wheeze and difficulty breathing that these little bubs have. And what we know is that it's one of the leading causes of hospitalisation for babies under 12 months of age. So babies will get admitted for either respiratory support, so pressure support with their breathing, oxygen support, and often feeding support because it really tires them out. And I think, as a mother as well, myself, I remember that first time my baby got sick and how terrifying that is. And so to think that, this is something that we can prevent with a vaccine to stop them from getting to hospital and needing all that additional support, I think is a really big deal, actually.
It can be quite nasty in particularly very little babies. And that's why we're here today to talk about the maternal RSV vaccine. And even before I was pregnant, I would see and hear a lot of chatter about RSV in small babies. And I've since learnt that almost all babies get it before they turn 2. How much of a game changer is the maternal RSV vaccine?
Yeah, it's huge. So this is actually the first time that we've been able to protect babies before they're actually born. We know that it dramatically reduces the chance of a baby needing hospital care, especially during those first vulnerable months. And we know when we look at the Australian data that most babies who needed to be hospitalised were actually hospitalised under the age of 2 months. So there is a particularly vulnerable period. So having that vaccine during pregnancy means that, babies are protected from day one.
Yeah, so how does that work? Because people might think that the person who needs the protection is the one that has to get the needle. But how does that work that the pregnant mother can get it and that protects the baby?
I think this is absolutely fascinating. Being able to receive a vaccine during pregnancy means that mum produces antibodies for the baby. And then if it's given at the right time, it means that the antibodies pass through the placenta and then allow baby to be protected, as mentioned, from birth, which is pretty incredible, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing. Look, I was really stoked to be told at one of my antenatal visits that I was eligible for the RSV vaccine and when I should go and get it. Is that the case for all women who are pregnant, whether they're a private patient or a public patient, that they will be informed and told how and where to get the vaccine?
Yeah, we're hoping so. So we firstly are hoping that all pregnant women are aware that the vaccine exists. And yes, it's available to all pregnant women in Australia who are going through, the antenatal care process. And in terms of access, really, it should be available at all GPs and community health centres for, pregnant women to receive the vaccine.
The timing is very important for pregnant women who want to get the maternal RSV vaccine. Can you explain to us what the window is and why it has to be administered in that time?
So the RSV maternity vaccine we recommend during the weeks of 28 to 36 weeks of pregnancy, and that is essentially during the 3rd trimester. The reason for this timing is to allow enough time for mum to produce antibodies and then pass them to baby before birth. And so you need that, at least 2 weeks for that to happen. I guess the other thing to mention is that you can actually have it at the same time as the other pregnancy vaccines. So until now, our big recommendations are around whooping cough, which can be given between 20 to 32 weeks, and then also the influenza or flu vaccine, which can be given at any time during pregnancy. So it's important to know, yes, they're safe, effective, and can be given at the same time.
I think we should speak about vaccine hesitancy because that's something that has also skyrocketed since COVID. And on top of that, most pregnant women are extremely cautious about what is going into their bodies, especially when it comes to medicines or things like vaccines. How safe is the maternal RSV vaccine and can women feel confident rolling up their sleeves to get it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I would completely relate in terms of feeling nervous about putting anything into your body when you were pregnant. And I guess suffice to say, with the RSV maternity vaccine, safety has been one of the big priorities. It has gone through large clinical trials and it's been carefully reviewed by health experts around the world. At the moment, we are giving it in the US, the UK and Australia, and many other countries are starting to also roll up their sleeves. And what we found in studies that of these thousands of women who had the vaccine, there were no increased risks to either mum or to baby. So certainly from our perspective, the data shows that it is safe and it is an effective way of protecting baby.
Where should people go for reliable information about the maternal RSV vaccine?
There are some great trusted websites. I think health.gov.au, which is the Australian Government Department of Health, Disability and Ageing website, is a good one to go to. But other more independent websites are Melbourne Vaccine Education Centre, so MVEC, and NCERS, which is out of Sydney, the National Centre for Immunisation Research. So if you go to those sites, what you'll see is the evidence is presented, but also they will link to the original references of the clinical trials so that if you are so inclined, you can have a read yourself. But also I would encourage that people speak to GPs, midwives or their obstetricians and really, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's all about finding out what you think is best for you and your baby, and that's what we're here for. So please ask questions.
Now, I think it's important, and we've been saying the maternal RSV vaccine throughout this interview, but it's important to reiterate to listeners that this is at the moment, we are talking only about this vaccine being available for pregnant women in that certain time frame. But getting this vaccine when you're pregnant and passing that immunity on to your baby, does that also impact, herd immunity for the broader community? Like, what impact could that have for people who aren't pregnant and people who don't have newborns?
The easy answer to this is that this vaccine is really about protecting the baby. So, as we said, most people have been exposed to this virus by the time they're 2 years of age. There is an underlying sort of level of exposure to RSV in our communities. And we also know that of people who are at risk of RSV, it's not just the very young, it's also those who are older, those who have weakened immune systems, and also those who have chronic, lung, heart, neurological conditions as well. So there are other people at risk, and there is a different vaccine available for older adults in Australia. It's really important to be aware of that as well. In terms of herd immunity, RSV, unfortunately it's not one of those viruses where when you give a vaccine that it has long-lasting protection. It's a tricky virus. Even if you were to get natural infection, it doesn't last that long. So this is why we're really sort of targeting people who are most at risk at the moment.
Linny, before we let you go, I guess, do you have a final key message or takeaway that you'd like pregnant people or families listening to this to take away with them when they finish listening to this interview?
Yeah, I think everything that we've said in this interview, that RSV up until now has been something that we haven't been able to prevent as much as we can now. So having the RSV maternity vaccine is an absolute game changer. There are other preventative therapies now available for newborn babies and young infants as well in their second year of exposure. So the RSV space is actually changing for us, which is quite exciting and new. It can be quite a serious infection. And so for those who are eligible, I think being able to get that RSV maternity vaccine is a really great way to be able to protect your baby. And, it's just one less thing that you need to worry about in those first few weeks to months.
Dr. Linny Fong, thank you so much for joining us on the briefing today and for taking us through the maternal RSV vaccine. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was Dr. Linny Fong, a paediatric infectious disease physician, speaking with me there. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Sasha Barbagat. See you soon.
Listener.